Welcome to this week's episode of TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stasia, and with me is Anna McCormack. Hi, Anna.
Hello, Stas. It's really lovely to be here with you.
Good to see you again. Apologies to our viewers that this is a day late, and was meant to be here on this recording, but I've received a message from her that she's got an emergency family situation that she's dealing with. So we're not going to do the usual news roundup, I don't think. We're just going to have a chat. So, Anna, what's happening up in Queensland? You've been very busy. Tell us about it.
So we've just come to the end of a 6-month series of monthly rallies. And for the first time, we've advertised the venues for those rallies. Prior to that, we'd had another 6 or 7 demonstration events with secret venues. But now, since May, so May, June, July, August, September, October, we've stepped up a bit and advertised the rallies, expecting some hostility and expecting a good deal of support, and both of those expectations were met. It has been important to us that the police attend to ensure that peace and order is defended, and that women's right to organise and women's right to speak is defended. Sadly, the police only turned up to 3 of the 6 events, but we were very thankful that they turned up to the most recent one in October, because there was a great deal of aggression from a group of 9 or 10 gender ideologues who are strongly opposed to women's rights. And, it would have been far worse for us if the police hadn't been there. But even so, they did inflict damage on one of our women, a middle-aged woman who uses a cane. She was very sharply elbowed in the chest by a gender ideologue who ran into a group of us. And her chest was sore for a couple of days. And another young woman was mooned by a trans ideologue and had the words, "I'll hurt you, you can't," shouted at her. After that happened, the police did keep them away from us, but they allowed them to participate in our march. We have just a footpath march because we haven't got 100. There's only ever between 20 and 30 people there, and you can't have a street march in Queensland if you haven't got 100, so you go on the footpath. But they did allow the gender ideologues to tack on the end of our march, which was a bit extraordinary, because they certainly hadn't put in a notice of intention to assemble or march, and we had. So it would have been more ethical and more respectful of our right to organise if the opposition hadn't been allowed to tag along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone sent it to me. It got your rally was screenshot and shared on Instagram, and someone sent me that Instagram post, and I forwarded that on to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. It's amazing the way they always portray us as these people who are violent, because that's been stated a number of times, that we're violent and that we're hostile to people who identify as trans. Neither of those is the case. In fact, the violence has always come from the people opposed to women's rights. And, we're not hostile. We're on about defending our sex-based rights, which until 5 minutes ago have always been respected. Well, to a degree, to the degree that has allowed sex-specific facilities like toilets and change rooms and meeting and fitting rooms, and which is now being overturned. So it's extraordinary that people can interpret defence of women's and girls, and in particular lesbians, sex-based rights as hostility to some other group.
Yeah, the word Orwellian comes to mind. Excuse me. Excuse me. So the rallies, they're going to continue?
Look, I think they probably will. I've decided at the age of 70 that I want to step back from the rallies. I'll continue to organise meetings, and we do have a public meeting next Saturday, and I'll continue to organise the annual RADFEM conference. It's become a 3-day Brisbane event now, and it brings together women from all over the country, really. I mean, we've had women, you've come from Melbourne, and Ange and a number of other Melbourne women, and women from Sydney, and women from far north Queensland. And this time we've got a speaker from WA, possibly a speaker from Adelaide, definitely a speaker from Hobart. Okay. So, yeah, and I mean, that's a great event, and we have really fantastic presentations that are cancelled from other venues and other forms of media. So we do, we've got a wonderful videographer. She'll be videoing and live streaming those events. And we have great discussion, and we have great social occasions as well.
Yeah. I encourage people, especially if you're in Brisbane, to come along to it next year. It's well worth it. And as I always say, it's really important to meet other women face to face, and it can be a real bonding experience and consciousness raising as well.
Yeah, there's nothing like in real life connection. I mean, it's fantastic to be able to have connections online with women in other places, but it's way better when we can meet up in real life. And I remember at the conference this year, I mean, I felt as if I had known you for ages, and Ange, but it was the first time that we'd met face to face. And this next March, Isla McGregor from Hobart will be presenting, and I've known her online for years, and we often have phone conversations and have a similar sense of humour, but we've never met, and I can't wait.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, well, tell us about the meeting that's coming up next Saturday, 12th of November. How's that going? How's the organising going?
Yeah, well, all good. We've got a venue in the Brisbane CBD, and I've been taking registrations for a few weeks now. So we've got over 70, good, mostly women attending, and I've tried to promote that event as you don't actually have to support women's rights to attend. You just need to be prepared to listen to the women who are being sidelined and ignored and demonized by the state and the corporations. Just listen to our side, because we don't get access to any of the other venues. And that, again, I think is why in real life is so important, because they can ban us from the media, as our, in inverted commas, ABC has, and to a slightly lesser extent SBS. They can get us kicked off social media outlets. They can refuse to cover us in newspapers like the Courier Mail and the Hobart Mercury, etc. They can't stop us meeting. Not yet, anyhow. So we've got some really wonderful women of experience and wisdom and skill speaking. So there's 5 women, and they're all speaking from a different aspect that explains why sex self-identification should not be legislated for, and the Queensland government is planning the legislation. So, you know, Kat Kariner, who's from Sydney, she'll be addressing the negative outcomes for lesbians of sex self-identification and the harm and distress and sheer horror that causes. Steph Hughes is a researcher on why men should not be in women's prisons. And she'll also be presenting on what happens to crime statistics when men are accepted as women. Dr. Diana Kenny from Sydney is also attending, and Diana was previously a professor of psychology at the University of Sydney. She's now a practicing psychotherapist and psychologist, and she will be explaining why the affirmation model, which Queensland and Victoria and other places have legislated for, why it's wrong, why children and young people should not be saying, oh, I'm the opposite sex and I want to go on to puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and surgery. And she'll be talking about the alternative, a much, much superior alternative approach of exploratory therapy and working through the issues of these with these young people. We're very fortunate too to have Deborah Ackerson, who, as all sports people and followers of sport will be aware, is an ex-Olympics champion in weightlifting and ex-Commonwealth Games champion in weightlifting. She's represented Australia several times at both the Olympic Games and the Commonwealth Games. She knows about fairness in sport. And so she'll be speaking about the impacts on sport of sex identification. And Edie Wyatt, who's a Brisbane woman and writer. She writes for a number of journals, and she'll be speaking about sex, gender, and shame. So we've got 5 women speaking from different aspects, and we'll also have a panel discussion. We'll share afternoon tea, and that will provide the opportunity for more informal discussion with our speakers. And I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Oh, I wish I could come.
Yeah, I do too.
Now, how do people register for this?
Well, they've only got until 5 o'clock today, Saturday, the 5th of November, and they will need to email IWD Brisbane Meanjin @gmail.com. Registration is not a quick process because they will be vetted. Right. So I will ask questions about their interest in this particular event and what else they follow or support, because our safety is at risk, of course. I mean, these days, feminist women, cannot gather in a meeting place, regardless of whether we've booked it, paid a deposit, ensured we've got security, advised the police. We cannot guarantee that our meetings can occur safely and fairly for us. So they will be vetted. I
call it trans McCarthyism.
Yes, indeed. Yes, McCarthy would be very, very jealous of the tactics that the gender ideologues are able to use against us.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And now, qnews.com.au did a little bit of free publicity for you last week.
They did, yes. Of course, by suggestion, it was an incitement to violence and to protest against us and to try and prevent our meeting going ahead. So I think the article was called Birds of a Feather. So they had a beef with Royal on the Park, the hotel that apparently...
It had, the title had the word bitch fest in it.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, nice little spot of sexism there, hey, calling us bitches. Yeah. So they had to go at Royal on the Park because it's apparently owned by the Sultan of Brunei, but the real target was us because we dare to defend the rights of women, and especially lesbian women and girls, and safeguards for children. So, you know, that's become the new target for McCarthyist tactics, as you've pointed out.
That article, it was just pathetic. They didn't engage on any of the issues with sex self-ID. All they did was say IWD Brisbane Meanjin are bad because they've booked this, they're using this venue And because this venue is owned by the Sultan of Brunei, and Brunei has some pretty strict homophobic laws, then by it's guilt by association. You must therefore be homophobic as well. It's just, and
Yes.
you know, my response, I did share that article on my page, and I said that you know, if we're going to use that logic, then I'm pretty sure that all of the technology that qnews.com.au uses to publish their work, all of those computers and electronics have been made by slave labor. The raw materials are probably largely collected via slave labor as well, and therefore they should just shut down their whole operation.
Yes, indeed. I felt like writing to them and saying that I didn't do this, but saying, well, if you can give me a list of the hotels in Brisbane that are owned and run by worker cooperatives, I'd be very happy to book one of those instead. So, but you know, as we all know, there aren't any. But it's interesting the way they continue this silly trope that anyone who defends women's rights these days is right wing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I use myself as an example of a left wing, previously communist woman, active in solidarity movements for well over 40 years, active in my trade union since I was 17, from 17 to retirement and beyond, workplace delegate, member of women's committees very often, activist in the women's abortion rights campaign for 40 years, involved in overseas solidarity movements around Cuba and Venezuela and Palestine. And, you know, I could list other left-wing activities. And I know plenty of women who defend women's rights who are also from left-wing backgrounds. Yeah. This is not about a left-right split at all, although the ideologues who oppose women's rights attempt to portray it as a left-right split.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the right is no longer conservative. They're fascists. Like there's that portrayal as well, which I think is over the top. Yes. Right. Yeah. No, it's just out of control.
Completely. It is out of control. And I think that although our resistance is small, I mean, one of the things that is very exciting for me is that this is actually the rebirth of the women's movement. Yeah. I mean, the women's resistance has never gone away, but it has had ebbs and flows. And we're rebirthing, you know, we're getting young women, middle-aged women, older women. And just because it's often the older ones who speak up doesn't mean the young ones aren't there. The young ones have more to lose than old women like me have. They have jobs. They're very dependent on their friendships. I lost virtually all of my left-wing friends because of this issue. And I got over it. You know, for young ones, those friendships are much more important, and their jobs are very, very important, you know?
Yeah, it's quite the conundrum. You know, I personally get so frustrated with women not speaking out. But then you've got to weigh it up. Well, they've got a mortgage, they've got kids, they can't lose their job. But then it's like, well, how is anything going to change unless they speak out? And
yes,
what we really need here in Australia is a Maya Forstater style case. I don't know what it would look like, because we don't have any sort of protections for beliefs here in Australia. We really don't in law. So I don't know how it would go, but you know, it needs to happen.
Something needs to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I
other
guess, go on.
the other idea that has been rattling around in my head lately is for, you know, a female employee just to put in a very serious sexual harassment complaint. That, you know, having to deal with men in the women's toilets is sexual harassment. If there's a woman out there watching that's, you know, just had enough and is in a position where you can take a bit of a financial hit if you have to, please do it. Do it.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I think it's very difficult when you're dealing with bureaucracies that are hostile. For example, earlier this year, when Shannon Fentiman, who's our Minister for Women, as well as the Attorney General, and who's the instigator of the sex self-identification legislation that she's been threatening for 2 years, she enables women's groups and individual women to publicize events that they're holding around International Women's Day and International Women's Week. But she won't let IWD Brisbane Meanjin. And, you know, people said to me at the time, look, why don't you take a complaint of discrimination? And sure, you can do that, but you're going to the Queensland Human Rights Commission, who are completely captured, who have made recommendations to government in legislative reviews that sex doesn't need to be distinguished from gender, for example, you know, with absolutely no evidence. And I mean, you're never going to get a fair hearing from the Queensland Human Rights Commission if women lodge complaints about what has happened to women as a sex class. We will never get a fair hearing. But look, I do take your point, Stasia. I think that, you know, a case would be very useful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bit disappointing that Sal Grover's case didn't go through, because that would have cleared up a few things, you know.
Yes, I mean, huge relief for Sal, of course, personally, because understandably it caused so much horrible stress through her pregnancy. And the man who took that complaint is such a, I don't know how anyone could see, sorry?
AGP, he's such an AG.
I don't know how anyone could hear him speak and think this man does not hate women. He clearly hates women.
Appalling, yeah. So you've got a very woke Labor government for what, another 2 years?
I think it is 2 years. Yeah. Not doing so well at the moment in the polls, apparently. I mean, I sort of don't follow these things very closely, but people have said to me that they're not doing well, that the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk is not all that popular. So I guess one of the things we need to work on is to get a commitment from the LNP that if Anastasia and her Attorney General, Shannon Fentiman, are able to push through this sex self-ID legislation, that they will overturn it if they win the next government. Sadly, I invited every LNP and Labor Party MP to attend our public meeting next Saturday. Not one has accepted the invitation. One had previously told me she would attend, but seemingly is now not attending, and not one of her colleagues. I mean, all those Labor Party MPs, they'll just vote the way they're told to, and they will not even listen to women. I mean, how you can plan legislation that erases women's rights and at the same time refuse to consult with women. It's me.
And also to say in all the consultation papers that this has no impact on women's rights. Like, it's insane.
Yes.
But look, you've only got one house of government there. So like here in Victoria, we've got the lower house and the legislative council. And, you know, that second tier just puts in some checks and balances, which is the whole purpose. But you've only got the legislative assemblies, and
Yes.
Labor are well in control. So
Yes, they are. I mean, they do refer legislative proposals to a series of parliamentary committees, depending on the subject area. But I've sat in on and given evidence to 2 parliamentary committees, and they don't function as a house of review the way parliaments like the Victorian Parliament operates. Those parliamentary committees are, I mean, on one of those, I supported the proposed legislation, and the other, which was the Born in the Wrong Body legislation that was passed in 2020, I opposed it. And they, you know, they let us speak as a SOP, you know, just to show that they were hearing from all sides. But we knew before we went there that it was just a rubber stamp. But when it actually, you read all this stuff and you know that they're very often not people of integrity, but when you actually experience it and you see the expressions on their faces, they're bored, they know how they're going to vote. I mean, with one exception, and that parliamentary committee did have a person, an LNP person. I've never voted LNP in my life. And he was really the only person on that committee who had any interest in looking at the issues of passing the Born in the Wrong Body legislation that legislates for the affirmation approach. He was the only one. Sadly, he's now retired from Parliament. But we didn't get any acceptances from any LNP MPs to attend our meeting next week, which is unfortunate because presumably they will vote against the legislation, but they don't know a great deal about the issues. And this would have been a great opportunity for them to hear the arguments from these 5 women who know their stuff, who've done the research, who have practiced, who have a huge wealth of knowledge. But anyhow, they'll miss out. We can send them the YouTube video, but it will be up to them then to watch and learn.
I don't know. You just well, look, a couple of things. One, you know, the LNP at the federal level, they are in prime position now that they're in opposition. They lost the federal election. Now is the time for them to tackle these issues. They can do it. They've got 4 years, and they're not. And it is so frustrating. That gives me the shits. And the other thing, I don't know if you watched Kat Karanar's video with the mothers of trans-identified children.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, just last week. So a number of mothers went to Canberra a week or 2 ago and met with, I think it was 9 federal MPs and senators, including Peter Dutton. Every single one that they met with were peak transed on the medicalization of children issue, not the women's issue. But, you know, they had no idea how bad this was, what was really going on. They were sort of shocked. Even this belligerent Labor MP, by the end of the meeting, had changed his mind. All of them said they would support an inquiry into the medicalization of children.
Right.
So I think that there really is this just level of total ignorance going on for a lot of politicians in this country. So, you know, it is worthwhile meeting with your representatives, educating them.
Yes.
Because it's quite possible they just don't know.
Oh, I think largely they don't know, because the few that I've met with, and I haven't met with any MPs or except via Zoom, for probably a couple of years now. But the few I've met with have had virtually zero knowledge about the issues and about what is happening and what it means for other groups of people.
Yeah.
It's but I think the other thing is a lack of care. I really think that until women are accepted as fully human, we're not going to make a lot of headway with this, because who cares about someone who's less than human? You know, I think they really don't care. And things that have happened in the past with children have shown that so many people simply don't care, even when there've been inquiries and royal commissions, even when it's proven that many people have become scout leaders and priests so that they could access children. And yet, you know, this complete disbelief, a wall of disbelief, is put in front of you when you talk about what's happening with children. They don't believe it.
It's horrifying.
It is.
Yeah. And on that positive note, Anna, I wish you the best of luck next weekend with the meeting. I hope it goes really well. I hope you get some publicity. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Thank you very much, Stasia, and thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward. I assume you will still be coming up in March. I hope so.
At this point, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So that'll be great. We'll have a good time, because, as always, there is joy in struggle, even when you're losing badly.
Yep. Thanks, Anna. Thank you to all our subscribers, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.
Goodbye.